So now I move quickly on to our next speaker. This is the last speaker for this session for today. And her name is Michelle Patel. She is the Deputy Director of Analysis and Insight within the science team at the Food Standards Agency, the FSA. With nearly 20 years in government and a background in communications, she remains an endlessly curious scholar of public attitudes and behaviors. Her aim is to understand how and why people do what they do and what the future holds when it comes to food. Thereby, she and her teams are seeking to provide better evidence so we can make better decisions. In addition to her work at the FCA, Ms. Patel's area of academic study is how the citizen perspective is brought into food regulation. Thank you very much for being here with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sonia, and thank you for your attention. I won't keep you from your lunch very long. Thank you, first of all, to BFR for inviting me to speak at this wonderful celebration of 20 years. Congratulations to you. I work in the science team at the FSA. We're the regulator of food in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. We work very closely with colleagues at Food Standards Scotland. We cover risk assessment, risk management, risk communication, and we have an overt remit in legislation to keep consumers informed of anything that impacts on their interest in the food system. Now, the public interest is a very broad thing. So while I run our analysis function, I've spent more than 20 years thinking about communications, and my background is in communications. We've heard this morning about some tremendously exciting ways that food regulators use to communicate with society. It's also been really great to hear some of the theoretical underpinnings of risk communication being adopted. These tell us that communication must be at least two ways. We are talking about the exchange of knowledge with society. And we've talked a lot about how we can speak to society. I would like to do a very quick fly past, and it will be quick, of how we listen. More and more, we're drawing on this type of science. We're investing in it. And we do this for several reasons. It works. Firstly, because listening and tracking and observing is a great way of discovering an early risk. Secondly, because when you are thinking about risk analysis, you can't escape the context in which that risk takes place. You cannot also, these days particularly, assume that the scientific view is the only game in town. We risk inhabiting our own elite echo chambers if we do that. That is really dangerous. Understanding mental models is key to understanding how people apprehend and respond to a risk. And in itself, risk in food presents in three ways. What's in it, what's on it, and what are people going to do with it? And we think that you pay as much attention to that last thing as we do to the other scientific disciplines. It's best not to guess. Thirdly, listening iteratively to understand what people are thinking, feeling and doing is very key to developing the more effective risk management and risk communication strategy. But I also think philosophically there's another reason why it's important. It's more important than just finding out things you didn't know. I think it is about democracy, and I think it is about an equitable society. When it comes to making these decisions, it's our duty to understand the values and priorities of the people we serve, and that's why we take that public interest bit really, really seriously. It's part of what gives us legitimacy. So I am going to run through 6 projects of maybe 20, which are helping us to do all of those things. I won't be able to go into any detail, but we publish all our work. So if you are interested, ask me, email me, talk to me, or find out more information. It's all Googleable. Oh no. Okay, good. So the first is our flagship survey. It's called Food and You Too. We moved it, fortunately, from a face-to-face first to an online first method of delivery in early 2020. So just before the pandemic, we'd already decided we were going to do that. It allows us to run more frequently. We run 6 monthly rather than every other year, and we run to a much larger sample size. We can run it modular, We can analyse much more quickly, and it tells us about consumers' reported attitudes and behaviours, their concerns. It tracks key measures such as trust in the food system, trust in the regulator, household food insecurity. We use the USDA measure, for example, and it gives us a really rich data set that allows us to dig into key demographics, do correlations, identify emerging trends, identify vulnerable groups. We actually started to plan our change in mode of delivery in 2018. We moved online in 2020. We're about to produce the first trends report looking at the first 4 waves of data, so the first 2 years of the new survey. However, it's been a funny couple of years. And with the pace of political, economic and societal change, even 6 monthly reporting feels pretty slow now. So we've worked really hard to develop tools to understand citizen awareness and concern quickly when data is needed at pace. So we use a market research panel. We work with Ipsos Mori. It's relatively cheap. It is very quick. Our record is 17 hours and 54 minutes to find a statistically representative sample. Don't test me on that again, but it can be done. The suppliers are actually really careful about data quality. There have been small breaches. We had some bots infect our sample. They spotted it. It was relatively insignificant, and it was dealt with effectively, which gives me quite a lot of confidence in how this stuff gets done. We used this recently, as you can see, some of the findings, to inform decisions on options around substitution of sunflower oil, given the shortages because of the ongoing war in Ukraine. So when we were making our risk analysis decision, we could provide the risk assessment, we could provide the consumer acceptability, and we also provided some insights on nutrition and sustainability as well, which helped us evidence why we'd made the decisions that we'd made. Because it's so quick, we're also using this method to track key concerns around the cost of living crisis. We were doing that weekly, we're now doing it monthly, and we can produce a dashboard within a few days of getting the data. And this is part of the fair exchange, I think, of knowledge with society. We publish as soon as we can. And this is close to real-time data now, and that's really valuable for other government departments. It helps you get something that is useful for the media. It helps you give something that is useful for other people in the community operating in this space. We work very closely with some of the NGOs, for example. But for the most part, so far, what I have described to you is still a bit one way, albeit the other way to some of the communication that we've talked about earlier today. And I think that there's real value in dialogue. At the moment, we're running 6 citizen science projects, which are really fun, and they give us some very interesting learnings about how we can do this. For example, one project is looking at students and food, and we've involved participants throughout. So we involved them in the co-creation of the project itself. We got them to be the data collectors. We then engaged other citizens in the analysis of the data to spot the risks, and the benefits are multiple. We get more realistic protocols, we get bigger samples, and we get a secondary effect of engaging citizens in what we do and the scientific basis of it. This is a hard-to-reach group. Now, this is at a tiny, small scale, but this is one way that we've made it more engaging. One of our other citizen science projects, for example, is looking at the safe use of bottles for babies. So involving citizens, involving mothers in the design of that project helped them feel safer, more empowered and an emotive subject than if we were simply coming in to judge them. And they've told us that. But thinking still of dialogue, there are times when to have a reasonably equitable conversation with people, you need to have to put the work in to engage them. It's on us. Right, so we're not talking about a deficit model or a knowledge gap that is their fault. I think our job is to communicate. Close that gap. So you kind of have to think creatively about how you can align the understanding of citizens and experts on complex matters, especially those which citizens know or care very little about. I know at BFR you ran an excellent consensus conference on genome-edited food in 2019. And we've been looking at the same issue in 2020 and then in 2022 through public dialogue, so a slightly different method with a different objective, not consensus, but more epistemic. But of course, rather than being able to bring together in a room a load of people over a weekend or two to discuss it, we had to do it all online. And that posed some real challenges in terms of engagement and fatigue, and you can't do a whole day online. No one can. So one of the things we tried to do to overcome that was try and make it as as hybrid as possible. And one of the things I really loved about this piece was we mocked up and sent a box of food to each of the participants' houses with labels on that weren't real, pretend labels, real food, and got them to engage with it and tell us what they thought of it, and some of them chose to eat it, and some of them didn't. Inside, what they had was not gene-edited, because that isn't legal in the UK yet, but it helped them to just make it feel real. It helped them engage with a hypothetical in a complex situation on something that they weren't familiar with by making it feel more real. We talked a lot today about the rise of social media. I think it's safe to say it has risen. It presents both challenges and opportunities for communication. As well as using it as a channel out to communicate, we can use it for news, we can use it to engage, we can use it to bring rich content out, to engage directly without the filter of the media. We also use it to listen. And we use this as a big, fuzzy, messy data set, but we can hear what people are talking about when they talk about food. We can look at it in a crisis in real time. We can dig down through keyword to very specific topics, or we can also listen really broadly and organically, having identified prior keywords which we then cluster and look at month on month to see how the discourse is moving. And it's imprecise. You only get people who are on social media, and you only get the people who are motivated to talk about something on social media. The demographic data is, shall we say, so blunt to be virtually useless in terms of age and location. But if you want to track a trend over time, or if you want to identify miscommunication, or people who are starting to talk about something where you can then perhaps even intervene, this is one way that we use, and it came into its own in the early weeks of COVID. We were moving so fast that we were looking for any intelligence, however incomplete, to inform our thinking, and we were doing daily, weekly reports right up to the senior executives, because that was how we were starting to see things emerge. Finally, I'd like to talk about a project which is not quick. This is a big one, it is a slower one, and I want to sort of use this to make a case for integrating this type of science. And I keep talking about it as science because it is. And I'm in the science team. I run half of the science team. My background is in comms. No one freak out. But there is something really great about working together and looking at different perspectives and bringing an interdisciplinary focus to something. And this is an example of how that can work out. So we're about to enter the third year of our Kitchen Life 2 project, which uses motion capture cameras, temperature sensors, as well as more traditional tools like qualitative interviews and surveys, to capture what is really going on in 100 domestic and commercial kitchens, with the consent of the people in them, of course. This has provided an incredibly rich data set, which will give us three things. Firstly, very granular, observed data to fill in some of the assumptions we're making in risk assessment about potential transmission pathways, and it has also identified new ones. Secondly, excellent evidence upon which we can base hypotheses about behaviour change interventions, which we can then test through experiments and trials. And thirdly, a means of investigating the say-do gap between people's reported and actual behaviours, which will help us triangulate the results from our other social science methods more accurately. So, although this is led by the social science team, this is actually a really interdisciplinary project, and it came about through a conversation between me and our head of risk assessment. She said, in passing, "If only we knew what people really did in real life." And I said, well, why couldn't we? And of course, with modern technology, it is much more possible to do this at scale. And that's a real advantage of treating this stuff like a science, invest in it like a science. So I want to end on the usual scientific note of caution. All methods have their limitations. There's no one size fits all. It all depends on the type of exchange of information you want, with whom, by when, and what you want the outcome to be. Sometimes you need to be fast, so you can't be perfect. Some people will be miffed by any method. The answer may not always be digital. Some things you have to do face to face. Sometimes listening as well as talking at society is time-consuming and expensive. Sometimes what you hear is politically unwelcome. However, I think it is our duty to seek and hear it. And I was struck by what Andreas Hensel said at the beginning about our role will be to destroy myths and construct values. We cannot do that if we can't connect. Right, don't guess. I hope that I've given in my fly past an idea of what's now possible. I hope I've sparked some thinking. Some of the tools that we're now using in practice really give us a two-way exchange of information with the people and communities that we've served. And I'm sorry it's been brief, there's a lot more here, so I'd encourage you to dig into this stuff and do get in touch if you would like to know more, and I hope there's time for maybe a question or two. Thank you.